Hey yo, I'm gonna do this a little different. Gonna do back to video recording instead of live because my stream keeps cutting out and it's kind of frustrating. And so I don't want to lose any data, any of this video. We're gonna go through some stuff. It's been a while, so I got a lot that I could talk about. Whether or not it comes to mind, we'll see. So, we've been looking at how the Earth expanded and relating the Emperor Trough over here to Baja BC accretions and suggesting that Western North America was actually physically atop it and along down here in some manner that's unclear. But, so that's why we're going to look at this because I've been finding some interesting things. Maybe I can just pull up some general concepts. Australia was adjacent to North America like this. Like this. Australia connected to Papua New Guinea here, which was then Australia. Western Australia was connected to Sulawesi, North Maluku, and then to Philippines, and then to Indonesia, Borneo. Borneo wrapping around the Philippines with the little knob of one of the arms of Borneo. This little nub here protruding into this area so that this chunk was in this space when Australia, this corner was up adjacent here and went up, so this segment was generally to about here, and then the Philippines were in this area, and then this was down here before the Earth expanded. And then of note, that whole block of basically Borneo, Indonesia, and Australia across like this was really up here across with Indonesian archipelago in the area of the Himalayas in north, and then the Earth expanded. And so we're looking through all sorts of stuff to go through the thought patterns of why it's really conclusive. What exactly happened is definitely a matter of details being considered in full, which is not a one-man project. But it happened, and we're going to find some really curious and compelling evidences as we go forward. I mean, that's the intention. I'm not really sure what we'll talk about. Let's see if we got anything else here. Here's that. So like this, where the arms of Borneo were around the Philippines, northern section. And it just folded in, abutting North America. Let's see. Where the other side, Solomon Islands region, were folded in. I believe New Zealand might have been up here. I'm not sure. I kind of think it was, though. People put it down here, like down south. People put it south in a lot of papers I've seen, so. But I think it might have came from like this area. Segmented away when Australia and Central America separated. And then we can look at some images to kind of see that there's unexpected parallels. believe. Shoot, where is it? Where might it be? Pause. Okay, I found it. So turning the map because it's just a good angle, and then putting Australia in, can kind of see they're quite related in the shape. Like right here, down, it's got kind of a Solomon Island type shape. This in general relating to here, as we saw in the animation. And these are super related in structure. We can look at the one I did here. Let's just see, they're super structurally related. Both have basins with a general elongated outer ring. They both have these shapes here, Bangui Islands and the San Francisco Bay. They both have, this one has Sutter Butte, this one has Una Una Island, like a focal point at the top area. There's these lines here relating to things over here, etc. Okay, so the point is, in this way, we can do like the everything though. And Ontong Java was forming with Manihiki Plateau, which is not on this image, and Hikurangi Plateau, which is over here. Ontong Java, Manihiki, Hikurangi formed together according to papers. See all sorts of, see my large igneous province playlist, I guess. They formed together and they broke apart. And my interpretation is that they formed together over in this area, possibly even related to the formation of the Gulf, really. I'm not sure. I suspect Ontong Java was closely related to the Gulf. And the division here may be related to the separation from Manihiki. And then a downward, upward pressure because currents were flowing this way, creating this like trident-like shape where there's like a pole and then an outward forking structure that then goes up, which also exists over here, more visible in magnetic anomalies. So we've got this angel, snow angel, oceanic crust angel with a trident coming off the top of its head. And then this was happening over here where it cut the crust basically. So this cut was happening over there where this is Manihiki is about here. Ontong Java is about here, and between the two is the trident, which was separating them, and then below the two in the Snow Angel structure is Hikurangi Plateau, somewhere around here. So those separated as part of the process, and we're gonna really try to bring a lot of stuff in. Not yet on that one. Okay, I'm gonna pause again. I guess I might as well just do that. Okay, and then under Ontong Java Nui, as it was called when they were together, was incubated the Hawaiian sphere that was once a sphere and broke apart as it rolled through this process as a product of the undercurrents that were moving physical materials around Earth. that started over under Australia at the Australian Ammonite. So it's a sphere formed here. It moved to here, and then when it was here, it was also here, same location at the time. And then it opened the gap and moved away so that it was in the center. So Ontong Java, Manihiki, and Hikurangi are out here. I'm not sure if that fully made sense. But it moved out here, and then it went up this way along the Trident. So it took the Trident path and managed to get up to Kamchatka, where it ran into resistance and was sent back this way. And then it ran into resistance and went this way and broke apart, so that the inner sphere is revealed as the final Hawaiian Islands. It's a product of hotspots. No, it's not. See Our Hotspots, Hotspots by Gillian Falger. Okay, cool. Our Hotspots, Hotspots. Notice I publish it in my Twitter thread repeatedly. Emerged from speculations that Hawaii, so it's Hawaii related. How the hell? It's really plate tectonics related. We can't explain this. We must introduce something to explain it, or the theory is debunked. It's really that simple. They had to introduce it. We had to. Hotspots, because it's in the middle of the plate. It doesn't make any damn sense. So it's this plume from the mantle, but no, it's not. Let's move on now. That's not the focus of today. I'm gonna assume that people are acquainted with my work, but I need to like give some information in case someone's watching. Like, what the fuck? So then over here is this indentation where the sphere hit. Sphere hit here. Boom. That's my interpretation. And then it seems to have gone like up here to here, and then back down this way, where then it started to actually break apart. Ran into resistance over here, which was actually at the Philippines, because this caused the Earth to expand and caused the Apalaki caldera, and then it bent along the Philippines until it ran into resistance, and then bent some more here at the second bend that no one really cares about, but that is, and then went this way, and then as it's finished rolling, it kind of lost steam and went down, and didn't stay in that straight path. Like, it's not really a straight path. So I've been looking at stuff and having some thoughts. Maybe the best way to go through it is just look at these things. So here is the Earth's magnetic anomalies in the northwestern Pacific. And this chunk here has Chinook Trough here, right at the base. Emperor Trough here. So again, Chinook Trough is this thing. Emperor Trough is this Mariana Trench looking thing in terms of its shape. Hess-Ross. So, what am I thinking? Let's actually pull up this picture now. This one. So Hess-Ross, my interpretation is Hess-Ross was over here in this area when the sphere made impact with it, relatively, and ultimately caused the bend in the 706 strontium line that Basil Tikoff talks about when it made impact there. Relating to this, but it didn't just hit Hess Rise over here, which is where the Columbia embayment was. Columbia embayments. Why's my phone there, Ben? Okay, I don't care. Decent enough image. So I guess, like, this is essentially where Hess Rise was. But it wasn't alone. It also had Kamchatka. So, like, these little nooks are products of the motion of the sphere, where it literally made impact. So it's like, notice Hess Rise basically starts here and kind of goes out to here, 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 at certain like points, and then that one. And this is where the crust bends. Where this, these were once together and they separated, basically. Doop. So that this and this were together. I'm sorry, I'm kind of losing thought, but that bend is generally related to where the end of this, not Chinook Trough, but this southern one that kind of resembles it at the far end, the southern end of the Emperor Trough. And then here is the Mendocino Fracture Zone, which is really important. So it goes over this way and goes to here. So up in that area is where Hess Rise and Kamchatka were. And then the sphere hits it, and that's kind of what I've been thinking about, is what is going on when the sphere hits it. Could this actually explain the data? Like, going into extreme depth, can we find some nuance that helps clarify exactly what's up? So if Kamchatka was here, and then if we consider Farrar and Dixon, Emperor Fracture Zone, claim, I know there's papers that reject it, early tertiary rupture of the Pacific Plate, 1,700 kilometers of dextral offset along the Emperor Trough. And then they go on to say Line Islands alignment, because they're trying to figure out exactly where it's happening. Between 67 and 40 approximately, and if you read the paper, it's kind of approximate. These aren't like hard dates. It's based on certain things that they just, so like bend date, the initiation, so they use the bend date, and then the cessation of seafloor spreading on the Emperor's spreading system. So you have bases for those times. But if you listen to Nick Zentner's channel, maybe I'll pause here and find it. They talk about that time frame as when things are moving. Northward Baja BC translation, so like Alaska's like down here. And all this is moving up. So what I'm saying is Kamchatka was attached to the terrains behind it, like a train. It was ahead. It was ahead of the train, the caboose, and all the things behind it moved behind it. But this wasn't bent yet. It was really moving more across in a linear way towards the Siberian Craton. And this area was forming. So there's a lot of details that it's gonna be tricky to go through without some really careful and meticulous compiling of the data so I can present it in an orderly fashion and not just ramble on. But, let's see. I'll pause here for a second. Okay, before going too far past this and not talking about it, this is all the Earth expanded by the global flood. The Earth was flooded, and these are the currents that the process induced, traceable in the Earth. I'm not sure why it's not letting me. There we go. And this is just me kind of putting some details out. So, I've talked about this in depth. See my playlist that relates to currents of the flood or something. This is the 125 to 75 million year old crust in this area in the East Mariana Basin that is supposedly 180 million. So this is odd. This is an anomaly. 125 to 75 million drill sample radiometric dating when it's expected to be 180 million. They've never found 180 million here. So that's curious. Keep that in mind as we go forward, because that will come back up at some point. Some other currents, eddies in various ways, Chicxulub, Bermuda, other currents. So the point is, the current flows are happening globally, that many of which are undercurrents as well. It's not just on the surface, but undercurrents. And what's happening is drawing currents northward here along, well, modern northward, along this path, as well as like in this path. So it was going through here towards Hudson Bay, but it got cut off and blocked when the docking of Rangelia, Vancouver Island, happened. Other currents, the Rocky Mountain Trench current that then comes through is held against resistance of an eddy at Hudson Bay. Keeps going. Okay, all this stuff. Okay, point is, these are currents that are happening. I'll just kind of quickly go through them. Feel free to pause or whatever. This is my global map of it. So we've got stuff going on up here. Okay. And then, importantly though, the crust was forming under continents, the oceanic crust. So here's the mid-Pacific Mountains. Mind you, this is on a smaller radius Earth, so none of this is exact. Mid-Pacific Mountains. Mid-Pacific Mountains. We're forming, follow these as like a boundary within this stretch under North America. Under here. And if we go over here, what do we see? We see up, down, and then this area doesn't have the down, but it's because it's gone and it's out here. Possibly Shatsky Raz, I'm thinking more than likely was that area actually. But it was a backstop upon which this last leg bent against. So the other portions were bending against resistance and basically compiling mounds against resistance here as the mid-Pacific Mountains. Okay, So the point is, though, this area is not alone. This, all of this around it is over there. So Mid-Pacific Mountains is forming, but so is a band of parallel lines. And if we look closely at it, if we follow this straight up, the center of the trident, if we follow it straight up, it goes through the nose, the front of the Mid-Pacific Mountains, the dragon through the nose, passes through it, and then it goes through this area where there's bending of other fracture zones like this, suggestive that the trident is bent off that way as the process unfolded. But if we just ignore that and keep going northward, we basically come up to where it bends. Is over here, it goes this way. All these are going one angle. Then up here, right after Shatsky Rise, here's Shatsky Rise, which is this. Right after this structure in this area, abruptly they turn. And I was thinking about this, and before I forget to mention it, I'm fairly certain that what happened was they were actually in line. They didn't form like this. This segment was directly in line, and it acted as like a joint as the Earth expansion process happened and plate reorganization events of the Earth happened. That was like a joint that it just bent from, but this stayed this angle because it's related to undercurrents over here from the primary mantle puncture hole. This structure is super important, but neither here nor now. Mainly though, there's currents passing above this high magnetic anomalies in the low magnetic anomaly blue region as like a wall of high magnetic anomalies, so that it holds pressure to allow for like a jet stream kind of thing this way, which then interacts up to Shatsky Rise in terms of being the dominant flow of this region, where it maintained it as one with Asia. But the Earth expanded, so it moved relative to this because something had to give, basically. And then down here, if that's the case, I was thinking these are kind of also not all equal in terms of certainty and so on, but down here it bends abruptly, and if these were in line, maybe this was in line too, I was thinking. And what does this point at but the Indonesian archipelago, essentially? So it goes up through the joint, down, although it's way overprinted with other things. It really is only visible down, more so over here, and like through a channel maybe, like here. But Indonesian archipelago, like a wave. So here's energy pushing into and creating a, it's like flat, it pushes in and it curls, and then it curls on both ends even, so that we have a curl down here, like a wave would do, and a curl down here. But really it connects where this was, where the one side was over here that then extended out here, was over here to where the like elongated waves far side moves to. All of this is happening while the Tethys terrains are forming, Tethys. So these are basically shoving it out. It was above India, and it's just shoving it out. Get out of here. Across through the Mediterranean region, shoving it out until it actually moved far enough out that it was no longer blocked by India. So then it shifts down because the arc is not an accident. It's actually, if we look over here, currents were flowing this way, relatively straight on through though. Straight on through Lake Baikal region and to the center of the Himalayas. So there's a flow going this way and a flow going this way. Resistance here, less resistance here, where this shoves it while the flow maintains its focal point into the South China Sea region. So it's doing this, but then another flow is causing it to shift, and then it pushes it further. Is the interpretation that I've put forth that this actually seems to corroborate. I know it's very complex when that starts to be part of the considerations in terms of what exactly is going on. So then, like, the Tibetan Plateau is basically a region that is no longer covered by this crust, and it essentially is a void. And what does a void do? It gets filled by outside pressure that flows into the void, which India did, moving by pressures, not just like, oh, I'm gonna just go there. Outside pressures beyond India pushing into it that were balanced relative to the pressure here are no longer balanced, so it moves into that space and compresses material. So it's maybe not even going down so much as it is just going more sideways like this, and then India moving up to compress material. Maybe a little bit of both and not so much all of the first way. But so then I've been thinking, like, okay, what's going on here? What's going on here? So maybe we can get into these things. So that's back to here. Chinook trough, I've read, is related to this feature here. This and this are related. Like, how exactly? I don't know. Maybe Chinook continued. Maybe Chinook was actually one with it, essentially, and separated and maintained a divide, being a place of divide. But really, it was over here. I'm not completely sure. Maybe, so that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, can this piece kind of fit in here with this one? And maybe, like, these ones are... Because if we look here, it's got these straight lines that kind of aren't here. And they aren't here in the way that they're here. But they are here, like, out here to this point, so they should seemingly exist in this area. And they should seemingly exist more so in this area than they do. So it looks a little like it's missing components here in these. And I thought, well, could this Chinook trough be up here? Where this chunk was actually here. And that's what this one is me kind of thinking about it. So let's move past this one because it's pretty boring. I'm not sure. This one I was just totally thinking about. Not saying it's the case, but I might as well share it because I was thinking about it. And here it is. Some of these lines of actually, maybe I should wait, but it's okay. Some of this point over here at Washington, where I said Hess Rise and Kamchatka were, is important because I also say Kamchatka was here. So if Kamchatka is related to this feature, where like the sphere ran into the region, shoved layers of crust. So there's several layers, and let's say ahead of it is resistance, and it shoves it, and some of it runs into the resistance, but some of it goes under the resistance, so it keeps going. Where what ran into the resistance bends away and goes sideways so that it goes this way towards where Kamchatka is, and not just this way to where Lomonosov Ridge is, which is what that feature is called. Lomonosov Ridge. So kind of like a deck of cards where there's several layers and moved over there. So if that's the case, then it would suggest that this point, which really is ultimately needs closed up to be even over here, it would suggest this margin somehow was like way down there. And I'm like, that seems a little ridiculous. What am I missing? So I thought, is it possible that this thing that relates to eddy currents by its structure and its structures relates to this thing's nucleus, almost like a shallogram having a top, an eddy, and a bottom, so it's contained between the two. And I thought, well, if we use Atlantis, Flemish Cap, which was Atlantis in my interpretation, which used to be over here at whatever this place is called. I want to say it's Porcupine or something. Something with Porcupine, I feel like, but I might be mistaken. But that feature used to be where Flemish Cap was. So if we use that as a pivot point, it's not like the worst coverage of the things. Like it brings this thing generally over Hudson Bay. I mean, it certainly seems like the scale could be off for how long this is. Maybe, because I would really more like it, something like. So I was just thinking about it, like, is it possible that there's some, like, on spreading that's not accounted for? Where there's just layers and layers that are delaminating from one another as the Earth expands to fill up the space with pre-existing crust, basically. I don't know. This one's pretty low. Low on my interest in it. I don't know yet. So let's go to more things. So instead of there, let's just focus on Kamchatka and Hess Rise region. So if we put Hess Rise where I generally interpret it, then notice Kamchatka is generally where the bend is. So if we straighten Kamchatka out here, if we turn it, let's say, so that this thing is where the sphere runs into here. Sphere runs into here, sphere runs into here. and then shifts it out this way. Boop. Where it just shifts over here. Probably pushing these being like pressure points into North America that are spreading it. But where like the Rocky Mountain Trench kind of stuff is related to Mariana Trench too. Maybe not exactly, but definitely, it's definitely got a good length, a good structure, good evidence that there's a possibility it's the Baja BC fault line, or transport line, whatever. Let's see what else I got here. This layer is this, or what's this layer? I don't know what this was. This is me just doing it more closely. Notice like the bend, boop. Like if we look at here, like it's super related. Now imagine a sphere runs into here, and below it, maybe above it, it's very unclear. Mind you, this is reshaping itself as the process unfolds. But like, if it uses these nooks as ways to progress, do like a gear, and moves forward. Runs into here, but then goes along this way, while the whole area is way more straight, though, so that it is really going more straight. While it's doing that, this is moving with it, though, and Asia and North America are separating. So that's the thought with that one. Let's see. Oh yeah, this drill site. Not sure. Believe that's where radiolarians are found. And then I believe radiolarians were found on this one, maybe this one. Somewhere I was hoping it would be this one, but I think it was on this one. That are like the same age and time frame as one another in Hesperaz and in Kamchatka. Which I thought, well, that suggests they were together once, and it moved away with the sphere. Basically, if you at this peak, sphere running into it. Notice there's even like little indentations here until it gets to this one. Almost like it's moving along these and pushing until it gets to this one, and at which point it goes maybe even like out along here to here, and then goes up like that, where the sphere is relating to the actual Emperor Trough, moving along that way, like so. So that's kind of what my thoughts are with Kamchatka specifically. Okay, I don't know what's on this, so let's close some layers. We've got North America and Western or Eastern Pacific, Northeast Pacific, North America. And then we've got that one, which we won't look at yet. We've got the one with Mid-Pacific Mountains. So if we kind of rotate this around, Get it down. So the mid-Pacific Mountains are kind of like boop. Then we got Hess Rise, pretty much where I was just saying, right there. And then the sphere shoving Kamchatka north. Possibly in here? I don't know, just based on this, I'm like, huh. But, when it's doing that, when it's moving Kamchatka north, it's not just moving Kamchatka, it's really Kamchatka is attached to Asia, and Asia is separating from North America. So some of these crusts are also moving. So like this block here, remember, is attached to Asia. So it turns. Notice even if we look at it here, these angles are relatively in line with those angles right here in this section. And if we go over here, this section's relatively in line with this section. So like current through this area is also interacting over here. So it looks like there's some relationship to like current going through here and just across it all, above it all, and down through here that are just interacting with this process where this is shoving it upward essentially. So this moves out though, so let's say it changes angle because it is on a growing earth and it moves out and it's out here, and then the next area forming is forming up in this wedge like this, like up in here, this up in this corner bend here. This is forming. And it's forming this way, I believe. Not actually sure. Not sure. It's hard to find certain areas of the Pacific papers on them. I know I found something that we can look at, but let's see if I can find it real quick. Should be recent. It might be that one. Let's just open it there. Yes. So if we go down, here we go. So 118 million. Here's Shatsky Rise. Here's the Pacific. So imagine here's North America. Like very near. This is where the Hawaiian Sphere is generally going along. To go up to the north. And then Hess Rise starts to form. And then the sphere impacts Hess Rise around 100 million. Dunk creates that little indentation, and then it goes around it. And notice 83 to 82. No Chinook, Chinook. Not trough, but the trough itself, as well as this crust. Chinook and Chinook. So it starts in this image below the trough only, and then it goes up above it. to be all of this. So by the region we're looking at is forming basically when textural slip is happening in North America. Most of the transport of Baja BC is in this time frame. Maybe at the earliest, like 105, there's definitely earlier, but in terms of the majority of it, it seems to be around 70 to 40. So in this time frame, when the Chinook Trough and the Chinook Plate are forming, shit's going down. So if we go back, so this thing is forming. Imagine that this is broken free from North America and it moves away from North America. And then between it, this thing starts to form. The next segment, but it's maybe even, my thought is maybe it's even straight like this, like how this been. I don't know. Is it like a twig? Like if you take a twig and bend it, and it's not brittle, but it's still like a youthful twig in it, so it hasn't dried out. It's still quite bendable. Without breaking it, maybe this was bendable so that it like a pressure point. Because essentially what's happening here, what do we see? We see up and then the Chinook Trough, just like as if the sphere was hitting at Hesperais, but again, kind of just pushing it open, pretty much pushing open a gap. And then the sphere makes it through to Kamchatka by following this gap, going through this region. Well, it actually made it to Kamchatka back here. It actually caused the Earth to expand by pushing Kamchatka northward and running into resistance of Kamchatka and going southward, but not until this time frame. So there's some relationship between Chinook Plate forming and trough and Hawaii. So if you think about plate tectonics, why in plate tectonics is there a plate forming very near Hawaii, this area, as this starts to, as the oldest seamount is? According to plate tectonics, this is not the end of the Hawaiian seamount chain. This is just what we can see, as presumably it's just been fucking feeding under Asia ad nauseum. So there shouldn't be a relationship between the first seamount ages and when this region starts to form. So it's kind of like it runs into Kamchatka and deflects off, but it moves up with Kamchatka as it deflects off downward off of newly forming crust that it's literally opening the space for it to form, going through this area where then it actually gets back atop pre-existing crust, but below other crust because it's under continents, and then it erupts from it here when the Philippines were over here. Shoving the Philippines away, really breaking the bonds. One second. Okay, so now imagine this chunk is forming over here. This is moving away to a point, and then they both are connected enough that they move like as one away. If that's the case, then it's possible there was a time that this one was actually more like this. Like also this area. So this is getting younger towards like 0, but in the last 66 million years or so, this area, especially eastward. But imagine if we just shove this here. Just kind of shove it here. So this area of the plate is pushing off of this area. And this area is forming maybe. I was just thinking like this here. This structure in the North American magnetic anomalies looks a lot like this. And I was thinking, well, maybe it was forming like this, so that there was some portion of it that was over here that then shifted out to be like there, wherever it is. Shifted out over to there. 1 second again, sorry. Okay, so then if we go back here, 118, it's straight relatively. And 105, that's when we start to see the Mendocino fracture zone really showing up. And then showing up more. So it's not only is there northward translation, there's like a shifting of the focal point westward relative to the Western Pacific, or eastward relative to the Western Pacific, so that it is shifting away from here and more eastward, more eastward to a point where then it starts forming these things, more of the structure. This gave me the impression that like this whole area up here became detached from everything else down here that was forming, so that there's actually slippage. And I thought, well, is it possible, like, let's say that the crust, this section, the Chinook plate, was forming relatively underneath North America, in that area of Alaska, to a point where this area was forming over here. Because if we look at it in that kind of sense, right about there, it's really hard to, I guess one way to do this would be just draw some shit. It's kind of like here-ish. And then where the bend is. Okay. And then remove this layer. So maybe a little less inward, but if we look over here, like there's still that, and if we follow that further, we see that. So imagine, like, here's where Mid-Pacific Mountains were forming, and there are all these lines that were going like that. That were the Western Pacific. Like this chunk. But turn back maybe like there. So it's forming like this, and it shifts out. But there's still like pressures in that manner to a point where maybe I was thinking maybe dextral slip could have been accommodated on the Mendocino fracture zone, which then abruptly bends, at least as per this, to go northward at to the Chinook Trough, not at it, but then to the upper trough. So that the portions of the dextral slip are along the Mendocino, which would kind of make sense for why the bottom half is relatively moving right, because the top half is relatively moving left from this northwestward pressure of this undercurrent that is maybe bulging, upwelling and pushing out from the Chinook Trough area. But so let's go back. So that's that one. Go ahead and move those lines. See what else we got. Okay, we looked at that one. Sure. Keep that one open. Glanced at that one. Looked at that one. And then there's this. Like if we turn this. Oops. Be relatively flat. Like, let me do something real quick. Leave just a little bit just to know that's where the Ontong Java plateau is. And just kind of ignore stuff. And just mostly get that. Okay. Copy, paste. Okay, let's make another one that doesn't include that crust. So this location was relatively right there. This location was here. This is like a bond breaking. Here, bond breaks. So they were relatively closer. And we still see like structure in here, but if we bring this one back and imagine that this area is forming and pressing outward to a point where it kind of is more like there. So then again here. But maybe, I was thinking maybe even like starting more inward. Or like Ontong Java. The Solomon Islands don't have this shape yet. But Ontong Java is forming over here at the Gulf. The pointy part of Australia here is pointing in here, and it moves out. And if you kind of look down the whole coast of North America, it essentially Australia is rotating. So if we go like here, like it starts and it needs to like cut this stuff off and imagine it more that way, but kind of wedged in there, and then it moves out and rotates. So it's rotating, just rotating like a gear and catching on the next resistance point, and then and just doing this rotation to come over here, and then at that point it's centered on the Pacific, on this structure. It's here. The pointy part of Australia is over here. Australia was here, basically. When this was forming, Australia was atop this area. And the pointy part was pointing into this area. So maybe, like I was just saying, Australia through Papua New Guinea region was kind of protruding into North America, either above or below. I'm not sure. There's definitely something I found interesting. There's exhumation up here of 25 kilometers in a region that I think the Philippines would have been, or the other islands, at least Borneo maybe. And that's about the crust thickness of the Philippines. This amount of exhumation occurred, and I believe erosion. So it supposedly the region uplifted and eroded 25 kilometers of material. Or it shifted off of it and uplifted. And it as like one block. It wasn't like grain after grain after grain. It was Philippines. It was Borneo. Regions of much higher thickness in the north, in the mountains, but generally about that thickness, though, that eroded from western North America in this area. I believe it's like here, where the Philippines actually I would have put here, and then Borneo, relative to this stuff. Philippines starting at Mendocino Fracture Zone and basically going up to here, where the sphere seemingly relates to this area and came out, hit Kamchatka, or Philippines. Hit the Philippines. What else? I mean, we could look at stuff. So, like, here. Imagine Kamchatka's here, like I was just saying. Then what's over here? Doesn't this look very much like a V? So imagine Australia's here. And over here... kind of reminds me of this. Like the way this margin is. So what if Kamchatka was over here, and then next to it was kind of like Japan, and next to that was kind of whatever, like these bumps. I don't know what this would be called. Mind you, I was also looking at Japan, and we just flow through this like weird divot. Like what's up there? Who cares? Follow it, and what do we find? A freaking pressure point. Boom. Boom. So crazy. And then some more sphere places here. This location is super interesting. It's got accretions, exotic terrains, really shows Japan's related more than I realized in terms of the sphere's motion and Western North America in general. Let's see. Oh yeah. Whoa. Again, if we imagine Kamchatka's generally over here, at the head of this. And then get shoved through. So this actually, because this looks so much like the Pacific Plate, makes me feel more confident that whatever she's drawing this data on is merited. Because I don't... this is essentially North America is moving atop this stuff. Sliding across it, as per her interpretation. And then becoming underneath it as these slabs of subducted material from westward motion of North America. Where that stuff kind of sat there is the interpretation she's putting forth, I guess. Sorry if I'm not giving it justice. And then I looked at this, CarMax 70. So the CarMax group, which is here, was down here around 70, but here's Yellowstone, and they've related it to Yellowstone, but look at this thing. And then let's look at the Chinook Trough. Also this one, but Chinook Trough. Not identical, but certainly oddly similar. And let's follow this maybe. What does that point at Yellowstone? If I go from right here to Yellowstone, let's say. Probably not. Didn't look like it. It's relatively parallel. Let's say I go down here to actually where this bend is. That's even a better location because it's where the bend in the Emperor Trough is. I mean, it points at Yellowstone then. It's all coincidence, dudes. All of it's coincidence. Oh, that's so funny. I mean, so there's that. And then CarMax pole up there. North America pole there. Suggesting it moved that much north, which is what's going on there. Okay. Some other images. I can't quite remember what's going on here. Also can't quite remember. Okay. And notice, imagine Kamchatka is here. And moves northward. And then gets sprayed out by the process. Like it literally elongates westward towards Kamchatka. If we follow, look at this one. The line here, this top line, goes right above the southern peninsula, or whatever it is, of Alaska. So if we, this thing. Not sure the angle, though. Doesn't exactly point at Kamchatka. Seems like it's maybe this angle. I guess it could. It's hard to say. But generally, like, these are pointing at Kamchatka in that image. Again, here where terrains in the middle are kind of getting squeezed out because other things ahead of it maybe even Or it's where it's not actually Kamchatka maybe isn't actually the caboose. It's more a center, and the things ahead of it get accreted to the Brooks Range Arctic Alaska segment, which this area is North American and was generally here, even though it was earlier from Siberia. So it's got Siberian affinities, so suggestive that they were just attached and it was left behind, really. And so it's there, and all of it acting as a backstop. So when these currents come up, it ran into that chunk that had resistance behind it too, and deflected off that way, even leading to this bend and this bend to go over that way. But then where this portion of the crust went up that way, I guess I'm still a little confused on trying to fit the Arctic into the equation. It's earlier, among other things. Another detail that I may or may not forget, so I should bring it up, is I believe in earlier videos. Okay, here we go. When Karen was on Nick's Alaska Tectonics, she was talking about the Orcus plate and saying it's 180 million years old. This plate that's relatively small that just subducts over here. And when I heard 180 million, I immediately thought, you mean like the age of the ocean crust that's labeled right here? Because this is where 180 million is said to be. But it's not. Drill samples don't show that. So it's anomalous. Why is this anomalous? Maybe a chunk of it is gone and is over there as the Orcus plate, is what I was thinking. Maybe it was like integral to Hawaii, because Hawaii, my interpretation, there's so many freaking details. Remember, it ultimately was forming under Australia, which ultimately was over top this area. And then this region of crust is missing, is anomalous. And what is there, though, has Ontong Java Nui geochemistries and ages and indications it is the same material just over there. Why is that, one might ask? Maybe because it was erupting all together in one location and things started to slide off the top of each other by the global floods lubricants and physically separated in like a fanning way, where like one thing is there and then the next thing and then the next thing back in layers, so that the Ontong Java is revealed over here, Manihiki and Hikurangi are over here, Australia's over here, there's other circles around that indicate an eddy in play, suggestive that like the eddy that was forming under Australia moved to the side, which was over here, which probably related to all of this, really. Maybe this was forming more in this area. I don't know, but let's get back to the Orcus plate. I just think it's probably that crust. It's probably the missing crust that, as undercurrents built up pressure and had nowhere to go, they just accumulated mounds, large igneous provinces that sometimes erupted through the crust, other times erupted below the crust, as Ontong Java etc., as large igneous provinces that became wedges to wedge open the crust. And in so doing, it lifted the crust off of other crust, i.e., Orcus plate, that then went, because mind you, this was all over here, was then boop, shoved up that way along the path of flow of the pressures and lodged wherever exactly the Orcus plate is. I don't know if I can find much of anything on this without looking for a paper or something. I thought that looked like her work. I was like, that looks a lot like the other stuff I've been seeing from her. Again, it looks super like Western Pacific. Like this just is actually there. Plate tectonics separates them, but it's just there. And then it separates because it slides off. Not sure where there's Orcus. Orcus 140 and Gayuchum. This I find odd because she has Arctic Alaska move over here, crumple this, and then move back. It's kind of a plate tectonics necessity, it seems. I don't know if I've ever seen this or mentioned this paper. This looks to have other images I've never seen. Krenotsky, it's actually got Siberia involved. It's not, it's kind of ignoring Siberia though, I think. Maybe not. It looks like it changed shape to its more normal shape in there versus here. Hard to say without really reading it. Probably could text search it. But the Orcus plate is involved. There we go. 60 million. It's kind of squeezing in there. So if that chunk of the Western Pacific slid away as the Orcus plate, as like the base upon which the Hawaiian sphere was moving, maybe, I don't know. Or it's like ring, even like a galactic ring around the black central mass. Yeah, so that's my thought on the Orcus plate. Let's keep going though. I could look at. I think we looked at that one. Okay, let's check out Sager. So this is Northwest Pacific area. This is around East Mariana Trench, or Basin. Here's the Mariana Trench. Bonin Trench, Japan Trench. And then I thought this was kind of interesting. They're not, like, this one's 20, this one's 21. So it supports that they were, like, continuous. That this and this are just continued. And that rotation happen to separate, pivoting off of around here at around M20 time frame. I don't know what time that is. Let's see if we can find it. $145 million. So around 145, that bend over here happens. It was straight, and then it bent. Where this region rotated. Or this region rotated and this stayed stationary, I guess. Relative to Asia. And vice versa, where this region stayed stationary relative to North America, and this region rotated. Essentially, doesn't really matter, same difference, both things happening, really. I'm gonna pause just so I don't sit in too much silence. Oh shoot, I guess I could actually just stop here because I'm not even sure that I'm recording my screen. So I hope so. We'll see. I'll probably keep going. This is actually a good method where I can just pause and keep going. That's cool. Alright. Peace out.